The rain had been falling steadily for hours, casting a damp, oppressive pall over the streets of Rio de Janeiro. Dr. Isabella Izzy Cruz stared out the window of her small office, watching the raindrops race down the glass. It had been a quiet day, but the email that had just appeared in her inbox was about to change everything. As a seasoned paranormal investigator, she was accustomed to receiving strange requests, but this one was different. This one was personal. Izzy turned to her partner, Lucas Moreira, who was hunched over his laptop, sifting through old case files. "Lucas, you need to see this," she said, her voice tinged with urgency. Lucas looked up, his brows knitting together as he walked over. "What is it?" "It's about the lead masks case," Izzy replied, her eyes scanning the email again. "You know, the one from 1966. 2 men found dead on a hill, wearing lead masks over their eyes. It's always been a mystery, and now someone claims to have new information." Lucas's eyes widened. "You mean Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana? That case has been cold for decades. What kind of new information?" Izzy shook her head. "I don't know, but it's from someone who says they were close to the investigation back then. They want to meet us at the old crime scene." "Sounds like a setup," Lucas muttered, but the spark of curiosity in his eyes matched Izzy's. Later that evening, they met with Rafael Silva, a skeptical police detective who had often clashed with Izzy and Lucas over their unconventional methods. Rafael had been assigned to the case after the police department received a similar anonymous tip. "I don't like this," Rafael said bluntly as they huddled under the awning of a small cafe near the crime scene. "But if there's even a chance we can finally close this case, we have to take it." The hill where Manuel and Miguel were found was a desolate place, especially in the dim light of dusk. As they ascended the rocky path, the air grew colder, and a sense of foreboding settled over them. "This place gives me the creeps," Lucas admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Izzy nodded. "There's a lot of residual energy here. Whatever happened to those men, it left a mark." At the top of the hill, they found an old woman waiting for them. Her weathered face was etched with sorrow and fear. "I was there," she said, her voice trembling. "I saw what happened to those men. They were performing a ritual, trying to contact something not of this world." Raphael's skepticism was palpable. "And you waited all these years to come forward? Why now?" The woman shook her head. "I've been too scared, but I can't live with the guilt any longer. You need to know the truth." She handed Izzy a faded photograph. It showed Manuel and Miguel standing next to a man in a lab coat, a sinister smile on his face. "That's Dr. Almeida," the woman said. "He was experimenting with mind control and other strange things. He convinced those men they could communicate with extraterrestrial beings." Izzy's mind raced as she processed the information. "We need to find out more about this Dr. Almeida," she said. "He might be the key to understanding what happened." Raphael sighed. "All right, but let's keep this investigation grounded in reality. No more seances or ghost hunts, okay?" Lucas smirked. "We'll see." As they walked back down the hill, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the darkness seemed to close in around them. The old woman's story had given them a lead, but it had also raised more questions. Who was Dr. Almeida, and what had he done to Manuel and Miguel? And why did their spirits still linger, unable to find peace? That night, Izzy couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She and Lucas pored over old newspaper articles and police reports, piecing together the fragments of the past. They discovered that Dr. Almeida had vanished shortly after the men's deaths, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and fear. "Izzy, look at this," Lucas said, pointing to a grainy photograph in one of the articles. It showed a dilapidated house on the outskirts of the city. This was Dr. Almeida's home. "We need to check it out." Izzy nodded. "Let's go first thing in the morning. We need to find out what he was up to." As they prepared for bed, Izzy's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. It read, "Stay away from this case, or you'll end up like them." Her heart pounded as she showed the message to Lucas. Someone doesn't want us to find the truth, she said. Lucas frowned, which means we're on the right track. But we need to be careful. This is more than just a ghost story. It's a murder mystery, and someone out there is willing to do anything to keep it unsolved. The next day, they arrived at the old house, its windows boarded up and the yard overgrown with weeds. As they stepped inside, the air grew colder, and a sense of dread washed over them. They found dusty bookshelves filled with journals and strange devices, evidence of Dr. Almeida's experiments. In the basement, they discovered a hidden chamber. The walls were covered in cryptic symbols, and in the center of the room was a large, blood-stained altar. Izzy shuddered as she realized what had taken place here. "This is where it happened," she whispered. "This is where those men died." Raphael arrived, his face pale as he took in the scene. "We need to get out of here," he said. "This place is cursed." But Izzy knew they couldn't leave just yet. They had to find out what had happened to Manuel and Miguel, and why their spirits were still trapped. As they searched the chamber, they found a hidden door leading to a tunnel. "Let's go," Lucas said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. They followed the tunnel, their flashlights flickering in the darkness. The air grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in around them. As they reached the end of the tunnel, they found a small, dimly lit room. In the center of the room was a large, ornate mirror. Izzy's breath caught in her throat as she saw the reflection of Manuel and Miguel in the mirror, their eyes covered with lead masks. They seemed to be reaching out, trying to communicate. "We're here to help," Izzy said, her voice trembling. "Tell us what happened." The mirror's surface rippled, and the spirits began to speak. Their voices were faint, but the message was clear. They had been tricked into performing a ritual that had gone horribly wrong. Dr. Almeida had used them as guinea pigs in his experiments, and their spirits had been trapped ever since. "We need to destroy the mirror," Lucas said. "It's the only way to free them." Izzy nodded, her hands shaking as she raised a heavy object and smashed the mirror. The room was filled with a blinding light, and the spirits of Manuel and Miguel were finally freed. As the light faded, Izzy and Lucas felt a sense of peace wash over them. They had solved the mystery of the lead masks, but they knew their work was far from over. There were still questions to be answered and dangers to face. "We need to find Dr. Almeida," Izzy said, her voice resolute. "He has to answer for what he's done." Raphael nodded. "We'll find him, and we'll make sure he never hurts anyone again." As they emerged from the tunnel, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the hill. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but they knew their journey was just beginning. The mystery of the lead masks had only just begun to unravel, and they were determined to see it through to the end. The morning sun cast long shadows as Izzy, Lucas, and Raphael stood outside the dilapidated house. The previous night's events had left them shaken but resolute. They had uncovered a part of the truth, but the real challenge lay ahead, finding Dr. Almeida and understanding the full scope of his malevolent experiments. Izzy adjusted her backpack, filled with essential ghost hunting equipment, and looked at Lucas and Raphael. "Are we ready to dig deeper into this nightmare?" Lucas nodded, his jaw set with determination. "We need to be cautious. Whoever sent that threatening message knows we're close." Raphael, skeptical as always but visibly concerned, agreed. "Let's split up. Lucas, you and I will check out local records and see if we can find any trace of Dr. Almeida. Izzy, head to the university. If anyone knew what Almeida was up to, it'll be someone in the academic community." They parted ways, and Izzy made her way to the university, a sprawling campus with ancient buildings that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. She headed straight to the Department of Paranormal Studies, where Dr. Mariana Flores, a renowned expert, might have the answers she needed. Dr. Flores, a middle-aged woman with a keen intellect and a warm demeanor, welcomed Izzy into her cluttered office. Books and papers were piled high, evidence of a lifetime dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of the supernatural. "Dr. Cruz, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard about your work," Dr. Flores said, offering a seat. Thank you, Dr. Flores. I need your help with a case that's both historical and deeply disturbing, Izzy replied, handing over the photograph of Dr. Almeida with Manuel and Miguel. Dr. Flores examined the photo closely, her eyes narrowing. I remember this case. The lead masks mystery. It has puzzled scholars for decades. Dr. Almeida was once a respected member of this university's faculty before he vanished. He was obsessed with mind control and the supernatural. Do you know where he might have gone? Any colleagues or students who kept in touch with him? Izzy asked. Dr. Flores tapped her chin thoughtfully. He had a few close associates. One of them, Dr. Hugo Ferreira, might still be around. He works out of a small clinic in the countryside now. They were very close. Izzy jotted down the information. Thank you, Dr. Flores. This could be the lead we need. Meanwhile, Lucas and Raphael were at the municipal archives, sifting through old records. The smell of aging paper and the dim light added to the eerie atmosphere. Lucas stumbled upon a file marked confidential and quickly realized it contained reports on Dr. Almeida's experiments. Raphael, look at this, Lucas called out. These are police reports from the 1960s. Almeida was under investigation for illegal experiments. He was suspected of using local people as test subjects. Raphael's face darkened. No wonder he disappeared. He must have known the authorities were closing in on him. But where did he go? Lucas flipped through the pages. There's a note here about a remote cabin in the Serra dos Orgulhos Mountains. It was owned by Almeida's family. That might be our next stop. Back at the university, Izzy's phone buzzed. It was Lucas. We found something. Meet us at the old archives. We have a new lead. Izzy hurried to the archives and joined Lucas and Raphael. They shared their findings, and Izzy filled them in on Dr. Ferreira. First, let's visit Dr. Ferreira. If he can give us more information, it'll make our search easier, Izzy suggested. The drive to Dr. Ferreira's clinic took them through winding roads and dense forests. The clinic itself was a modest building, nestled in a secluded area. As they approached, a sense of unease settled over them. Dr. Ferreira was an elderly man, his white hair and glasses giving him a scholarly appearance. He greeted them with cautious curiosity. Dr. Ferreira, we need to ask you about your colleague, Dr. Almeida. Izzy began, showing him the photograph. Ferreira's eyes widened in recognition. Almeida. I haven't heard that name in years. What has he done now? Izzy explained their investigation, the mysterious deaths, and the threatening message. Ferreira listened intently, a troubled expression on his face. Almeida was brilliant but reckless. He believed he could contact other dimensions, control minds, even cheat death. He disappeared after the lead masks incident. I feared the worst, Ferreira said, his voice trembling. Do you know where he might have gone? Lucas asked. Ferreira nodded slowly. He had a cabin in the Serra dos Orgulhos. It's remote, difficult to find. If he's hiding, that's where he'll be. Raphael took a deep breath. Then that's where we're going. Dr. Ferreira, do you have any idea what we might face there? Ferreira looked at them gravely. Almeida's experiments were dangerous. He dabbled in things best left alone. Be prepared for anything. As they left the clinic, the weight of Ferreira's words hung heavily in the air. The journey ahead promised not only answers, but also unimaginable dangers. The next morning, they set out for the mountains, their vehicle packed with equipment and supplies. The road grew narrower and more treacherous as they ascended, the trees closing in around them like silent sentinels. Izzy couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Stay alert. We don't know what's out there. They reached the cabin by late afternoon, the structure barely visible through the thick foliage. It was old, almost decrepit, yet it exuded an aura of malevolence. This is it, Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper. Let's find out what Almeida was hiding. They approached the cabin cautiously, weapons and flashlights at the ready. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. Dust motes floated in the air, and the smell of decay was overpowering. In the center of the room was a large, crude altar, similar to the one they had found in the basement of Almeida's house. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, and a collection of disturbing artifacts littered the space. As they explored further, they found a series of journals, filled with Almeida's frantic scrawlings. His writings spoke of his experiments, his search for otherworldly contact, and his descent into madness. "These are his records," Raphael said, flipping through the pages. He was trying to open a portal to another dimension. Izzy's heart raced as she read the journal entries. He believed he could harness the power of these beings, control them. But something went wrong. A sudden noise from outside made them all jump. They rushed to the window and saw shadows moving among the trees. Figures barely human, with glowing eyes and twisted forms. "Demons," Lucas whispered. "Almeida summoned them, and now they're here." As the figures closed in, Izzy, Lucas, and Raphael knew they had to act fast. They had uncovered the truth, but they had also awakened a dormant evil. The final battle for survival had begun, and they were determined to end Almeida's legacy of horror once and for all. The night was silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves as Izzy, Lucas, and Raphael faced the encroaching shadows. The grotesque figures advanced slowly, their eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. Izzy's heart pounded as she realized the depth of Almeida's madness. He had not just toyed with the supernatural, he had unleashed it. "We need to find a way to banish these entities back to wherever they came from," Izzy whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. Lucas scanned the room, his eyes landing on the journals. Almeida's notes. He must have written something about how to control or banish these creatures. Raphael, his skepticism now replaced by palpable fear, grabbed a journal and began frantically searching for answers. "There's got to be a ritual or something here. We can't just fight these things with our bare hands." As they combed through the journals, the creatures drew nearer, their movements slow but unrelenting. The tension in the room was thick, each second feeling like an eternity. Izzy's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. "There!" Lucas exclaimed, pointing to a page filled with cryptic symbols and incantations. Almeida wrote about a ritual that can close the portal and send these entities back. But it's complex, and we need specific items. Izzy read the page over his shoulder. "We need candles, salt, and something that belonged to Almeida. There's a list of incantations we have to recite in a specific order." "We don't have much time," Raphael said, glancing at the window where the figures were now clearly visible. "We need to find those items and fast." The cabin's interior was a chaotic mess, but they searched with a new urgency. Lucas found candles in a drawer, while Izzy located a bag of salt among the various occult items. Raphael stumbled upon a small, worn photograph of Almeida with his family, a personal item they hoped would suffice. "Let's set this up," Izzy instructed, her hands shaking as she arranged the candles in a circle and poured the salt around them. The photograph was placed at the center, and they each took a position around the makeshift altar. Lucas began the incantation, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "By the power of this circle, we command thee, return to thy realm, leave this place." Izzy and Raphael joined in, their voices merging into a single, desperate chant. The air grew colder, and the shadows outside the window seemed to writhe in response. As they continued, a guttural growl echoed through the cabin. One of the creatures had reached the door and was clawing at the wood, leaving deep gashes. Izzy's concentration wavered, but she forced herself to stay focused on the words. "Return to thy realm, leave this place," they chanted, louder and more insistent. Suddenly, a deafening scream filled the cabin, and the creatures outside began to convulse violently. The candles flickered, and a gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing them. The darkness was absolute, and for a moment, Izzy feared they had failed. But then, as quickly as it had begun, the noise stopped. The oppressive presence lifted, and the air felt lighter. Izzy fumbled for her flashlight and turned it on, revealing an empty doorway. The creatures were gone. "We did it," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid speaking too loudly would bring the horrors back. Raphael let out a shaky breath. I can't believe it worked, but we're not out of the woods yet. We need to find Almeida and make sure this can't happen again." They gathered their equipment and prepared to leave the cabin. As they stepped outside, the forest was eerily silent, the only sound the crunch of leaves under their boots. The path ahead was uncertain, but they were determined to follow it to the end. Their first stop was the local police station, where they hoped to find more information on Almeida's whereabouts. The station was a small, unassuming building, but its interior was bustling with activity. Officer Mendez, the same officer who had initially dismissed their concerns, greeted them with a mix of surprise and curiosity. "You're back," Mendez said, raising an eyebrow. "Did you find anything?" Izzy nodded, her expression serious. "More than we expected. We need access to any records you have on Dr. Almeida and the lead mask's case." Mendez hesitated, but eventually agreed. "Follow me. I'll show you what we have." In the station's archive room, they found a treasure trove of documents detailing the investigation into Almeida's experiments. The reports were disturbing, filled with accounts of missing persons, strange occurrences, and testimonies from terrified witnesses. "This is worse than we thought," Lucas muttered, reading through a particularly harrowing report. He wasn't just experimenting on people. He was conducting rituals, trying to summon and control these entities. Raphael's eyes widened as he read a report mentioning a hidden lab. "There's a secret lab in the old hospital on the outskirts of town. That's where he conducted his most dangerous experiments. If he's still working, that's where we'll find him." The team geared up, knowing this could be their final confrontation with Almeida. The hospital was a looming, abandoned structure, its windows broken and its walls covered in graffiti. The air was thick with the scent of decay and the memories of those who had suffered within its walls. They entered cautiously, flashlights cutting through the gloom. The corridors were long and winding, filled with the detritus of a place long forgotten. But as they ventured deeper, they began to notice signs of recent activity. Footprints in the dust, discarded medical equipment, and the faint smell of chemicals. Finally, they reached a heavy metal door marked "Restricted Access." Izzy's heart pounded as she pushed it open, revealing a large room filled with scientific equipment, occult artifacts, and in the center, a figure hunched over a desk. Dr. Almeida. He looked up, his eyes wild with madness. "You shouldn't have come here," he hissed. "You don't understand the power I've harnessed." Izzy stepped forward, her voice firm. "We understand enough. Your experiments have caused unimaginable suffering. It ends now." Almeida laughed, a sound devoid of sanity. "You think you can stop me? I've seen beyond the veil. I control forces you can't even comprehend." Lucas and Raphael moved to flank Almeida, but he raised a hand, and the room seemed to come alive with shadows. Figures emerged from the darkness, their forms twisted and unnatural. "Fight them!" Izzy shouted, grabbing a piece of equipment and swinging it at one of the creatures. The battle was chaotic, a blur of movement and sound as they struggled against the supernatural onslaught. In the midst of the chaos, Lucas managed to knock over a table, spilling a collection of vials. One of them shattered, releasing a noxious gas that sent the creatures into a frenzy. Izzy seized the opportunity and lunged at Almeida, knocking him to the ground. As they grappled, Izzy noticed a strange device on Almeida's desk. It was connected to a series of wires and appeared to be some sort of control mechanism. She smashed it with a nearby pipe, and the effect was immediate. The creatures froze, then dissipated into the shadows from which they had come. Almeida lay on the ground, defeated and muttering incoherently. "You can't stop it. The veil has been pierced. They will come again." Izzy stood over him, her face set in grim determination. "Not if we can help it. This ends now." They secured Almeida and called the police, ensuring he would be taken into custody. As they left the hospital, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. The nightmare was over, but the scars it left would remain. Izzy, Lucas, and Raphael knew they had faced something beyond their understanding, but they had prevailed. The town could begin to heal, and the spirits of those lost could finally find peace. As they drove back to the police station, Izzy looked at her friends and felt a surge of gratitude. They had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger for it. The mystery of the lead masks had been solved, but their journey into the unknown was far from over. The drive to the old hospital on the outskirts of town was fraught with tension. Izzy, Lucas, and Raphael were on edge, each lost in their thoughts about the confrontation ahead. The sky had turned a bruised shade of twilight, casting an eerie pallor over the landscape. The hospital loomed in the distance, a hulking silhouette against the dying light. As they approached, Lucas spoke up, his voice breaking the silence. "Remember, Almeida is dangerous, not just because of what he's done, but because of what he believes he can do. Stay sharp." Izzy nodded, her grip tightening on the wheel. "We need to stay together. We can't let him divide us or use our fears against us." Raphael, sitting in the back, checked his equipment. "I've got the EMF reader, thermal camera, and a few other gadgets. If there's any paranormal activity, we'll know about it." The hospital was abandoned, its entrance boarded up and surrounded by a rusting chain-link fence. They parked the car and approached cautiously, prying open a gap in the fence to slip through. The building's facade was cracked and weathered, with overgrown vines snaking their way up the walls. Inside, the air was musty, filled with the scent of decay and neglect. Their footsteps echoed in the empty corridors, each sound amplified by the silence. Izzy led the way, flashlight beams sweeping across peeling paint and broken furniture. "Almeida's lab is supposed to be in the basement," Raphael said, consulting a map they had found in the police archives. "There should be a stairwell around here." They found the stairwell behind a heavy door marked "Restricted Access." The steps creaked under their weight as they descended, the darkness below seeming to swallow them whole. The basement was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and abandoned rooms, but the signs of recent activity were unmistakable. Footprints in the dust, discarded syringes, and the faint smell of chemicals. Finally, they reached a door at the end of the corridor. It was reinforced with metal and had an electronic lock, a stark contrast to the rest of the decrepit building. Lucas knelt by the door, pulling out a small toolkit. "I can bypass this," he said, working quickly to disable the lock. Moments later, there was a soft click and the door swung open. The room beyond was a stark contrast to the rest of the hospital. It was clean and orderly, filled with scientific equipment and occult artifacts. In the center of the room stood a large metal table, and beside it, Dr. Almeida, hunched over a set of instruments. He looked up as they entered, a twisted smile spreading across his face. "You're too late," he said, his voice a rasp. "I've already begun the final phase. You cannot stop what is coming." Izzy stepped forward, her flashlight trained on him. "We're here to put an end to this, Almeida. Your experiments have caused enough pain." Almeida laughed, a hollow, unsettling sound. "You think you understand, but you don't. I've pierced the veil between worlds. I can control them." As he spoke, shadows seemed to gather in the corners of the room, coalescing into humanoid forms. Lucas and Raphael readied their equipment, the EMF reader spiking wildly. "We need to disrupt whatever ritual he's performing," Raphael said urgently. "Look for anything we can use." Izzy's eyes scanned the room, landing on a series of candles arranged in a circle around a complex diagram drawn on the floor. She moved quickly, kicking the candles over and smudging the diagram with her foot. "No!" Almeida shouted, his face contorting with rage. He lunged at Izzy, but Lucas intercepted him, the two men grappling on the floor. Raphael focused the thermal camera on the shadow figures, noticing that they flickered and wavered in response to the disruption. "Keep going, Izzy. It's working." Izzy continued her efforts, overturning tables and smashing vials of strange liquids. The shadows began to dissipate, their forms unraveling as the ritual was broken. Almeida fought desperately, his strength fueled by madness, but Lucas managed to pin him down. "You don't understand," Almeida panted, his voice frantic. "Without the ritual, they'll be unleashed without control. They'll consume everything. Izzy looked at him, her eyes steely. Better that than let you continue this horror. With the ritual disrupted, the shadows vanished completely, leaving the room in silence. Almeida slumped to the floor, defeated and muttering incoherently. Lucas stood, breathing heavily, his eyes on Izzy. "We need to get him out of here," he said. "The police can take him into custody. This place needs to be shut down for good." They secured Almeida and made their way back to the surface, the oppressive atmosphere of the hospital lifting as they ascended. Outside, they called the police, who arrived swiftly, taking Almeida away and securing the building. As the police processed the scene, Izzy, Lucas, and Raphael stood by, watching the activity. The night was clear, the stars bright above them, but the weight of what they had experienced lingered. "We did it," Raphael said softly. "We stopped him." Izzy nodded, though her thoughts were already turning to the future. "There's still so much we don't understand about what he was doing. We need to learn more, to make sure this doesn't happen again." Lucas placed a hand on her shoulder. "One step at a time. We'll figure it out together." The ordeal had brought them closer, forged a bond through shared terror and determination. As they drove back to town, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, they knew their journey was far from over. The mystery of the lead masks had been solved, but the echoes of Almeida's madness would resonate for a long time to come. They were ready, though, to face whatever came next together. The aftermath of Almeida's capture brought a deceptive calm to Serra do Guaiba. The police had sealed off the hospital, and the media had latched onto the bizarre details of the case. But Izzy, Lucas, and Raphael knew that the story was far from over. Almeida had warned them that the disrupted ritual had left an uncontrolled force in its wake. They couldn't rest until they ensured the town's safety. A week later, the trio convened in Izzy's apartment, the walls lined with charts, maps, and notes about the investigation. The room was dimly lit, the atmosphere tense. "We've been getting reports of strange occurrences all over town," Raphael said, scanning the latest updates on his laptop. "People are seeing shadows, hearing whispers, and experiencing sudden cold spots." Lucas nodded grimly. "It's the same patterns we saw before. The spirits Almeida summoned are still here, and without his control, they're lashing out." Izzy rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of their task. "We need to figure out how to send them back. We can't let this go on." Just then, her phone buzzed with a text from Detective Carvalho. It was a simple message: "Come to the station. Urgent." They quickly gathered their gear and headed to the police station. Carvalho was waiting for them, his face drawn and serious. "We've had a major development," he said, leading them to a conference room where a map of the town was spread out on the table. Red pins marked several locations. "These are the latest sightings," Carvalho explained. "But this one," he pointed to a pin in the forest near the old lead mines, "is different. We received a call from a couple who went hiking. They said they saw people in lead masks. When we arrived, we found their car abandoned and no sign of them." Izzy felt a chill run down her spine. "The lead masks, it's happening again." Carvalho nodded. "We need your help. We don't have the expertise to deal with this." "We'll go," Lucas said without hesitation. "We've got the equipment to track and hopefully contain whatever's out there." They loaded up their van with their gear and set off for the forest. The drive was silent, each of them mentally preparing for the confrontation ahead. The sun was setting as they reached the trailhead, casting long shadows that seemed to twist and dance unnaturally. "This is it," Izzy said, checking her flashlight and camera. "Stay close and keep your eyes and ears open." They moved cautiously through the forest, the dense trees closing in around them. Raphael monitored the EMF reader, which was already spiking erratically. "We're definitely not alone out here." As they approached the old mine entrance, they saw flickering lights and heard faint chanting. Creeping closer, they found a group of people standing in a circle, wearing lead masks. The sight was surreal and unsettling, the masks' blank expressions reflecting the firelight. Lucas motioned for them to spread out. "We need to break this up before it gets any worse." Izzy stepped forward, her voice firm. Stop! What you're doing is dangerous. You need to leave now. The masked figures turned as one, their movements unnervingly synchronized. One stepped forward, removing their mask to reveal a pale, expressionless face. You don't understand. We are the conduits. The ritual must be completed. Before they could react, the ground trembled, and a cold wind swept through the forest. Shadows began to gather, forming into dark, indistinct shapes. The air was thick with a malevolent presence, and the temperature dropped rapidly. "We need to disrupt the circle," Raphael shouted, pulling out a bag of salt. "It should break the connection." They rushed forward, scattering the salt and breaking the circle of masked figures. The chanting faltered, and the shadows hesitated, their forms wavering. But the lead mask leader raised a hand, and a wave of dark energy surged forward, knocking them off their feet. Izzy struggled to her knees, her vision blurred. She saw Lucas and Raphael also trying to stand, but the force of the energy was too strong. The masked leader advanced, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You cannot stop us. The spirits demand appeasement." Drawing on every ounce of strength, Izzy reached into her pocket and pulled out a small vial of holy water. She flung it at the leader, the water sizzling as it made contact. The leader screamed, a horrifying, inhuman sound, and the shadows recoiled. "Now!" Lucas shouted, throwing a second vial, while Raphael used his equipment to emit a high-frequency pulse. The combination of holy water and sound waves disrupted the ritual completely. The shadows dissipated, their forms unraveling into the night. The masked figures collapsed, the lead masks falling from their faces to reveal ordinary people, dazed and confused. The leader was gone, his body having vanished with the shadows. Breathing heavily, Izzy helped Lucas and Raphael to their feet. "Is it over?" Raphael asked, looking around warily. "For now," Izzy said, though she couldn't shake the feeling that they had merely scratched the surface of a much deeper mystery. As they escorted the freed individuals back to the trailhead, they knew there would be questions to answer and more work to be done. The town had been saved, but the echoes of Almeida's experiments and the ancient rituals of the lead masks would continue to haunt them. Back at the police station, Carvalho met them with a mixture of relief and curiosity. "You did it, but what exactly happened out there?" Izzy took a deep breath, ready to recount their harrowing experience. "It's a long story, but we've managed to stop the immediate threat. However, we need to understand the history behind these masks and the rituals. There's more to uncover." As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, they knew their journey was far from over. The mystery of the lead masks had been solved for now, but the paranormal world had been exposed in ways they had never anticipated. They were ready to face whatever came next, united in their determination to protect the town and uncover the truth.